Stephaun Wallace with the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. And we're here to talk about intersections, and specifically the intersections of all of our lives with science and the myriad of ways that we are impacted by science and we engage in science. Stay tuned as I speak with a host of community leaders, advocates, and scientists as we dive deeper into their intersections.
My name is Matthew Rose. I am a community advocate among many titles that I've worn. In 2009, the VTN recorded a video of me calling me the fresh face. But really, I'm just a guy who wants to take HIV out of people's lives and make them not have to think about it by doing all the things he can, and thinks that a vaccine is probably the best, most powerful way to do that. Global health advocate, but specialized in HIV, especially in HIV vaccines.
What got you into advocacy?
Selfishly, I wanted to save my life. I wanted to save the lives of the people who look like me, the people who walk like me, talk like me, get busy like me. I remember in college, I was reading about the statistics of HIV among Black gay men and was floored and was like, why is no one doing anything? And I said, this is me. This data set is me. I am the living and breathing embodiment of what they're trying to talk about, but they don't seem to understand who I am. And so someone needs to be there to say who we are and why we matter.
How long have you been doing this work?
12 years, which is a wild thing to think of.
How so?
I think of where I started, where I got, how I got here. I was not a heavy science kid growing up, almost ever. And now I fight with immunologists and virologists on clinical data points. And you're like, oh, that's weird. Where did that come from? So it's not something I ever initially envisioned myself being, but I just kind of found a calling in.
And you obviously enjoy it.
I do at times. I'm not gonna lie. There are moments that frustrate me to all hell. I'm still mad to this day about the slowness in which we launched trials following up on RFP 144. I'm still mad about our lack of adaptive trial design.
So people may not be aware of the terminology adaptive trial design. So if you could unpack that.
It's like the Kentucky Derby, which is about to happen. You set everybody up on the line and then you say, go. And then unlike the Kentucky Derby, if at the Kentucky Derby you had a water jump, and of course you didn't make it off over the water jump, you pull them off the track. You do the same thing. So you're peeling away things that don't work, but you have periodic checkpoints of where you're going to look in, evaluate if someone has met a marker to decide if we continue to go forward. Science is constantly iterating while we're going. So let's make science be able to iterate in the trial process as well. So it adapts to kind of the conditions of the ground around it. Hence the adaptive part, and then you do it intentionally, hence the design part.
We've been in COVID, essentially.
Yes.
Right? And so that's impacted all of us in different ways. Can you describe how it's impacted you both professionally and personally?
We learned so much from COVID, but also not enough. We learned how to talk about science better, the gaps people in understanding what science means to their life, understanding what public health does. We take the things that we know we're doing well and we figure out why those were doing well and supercharge them. There is a gap between people taking adult vaccines and the last adult vaccine we had people take was HPV. And on that one, we were like, cancer. Oh, you don't want cancer. We were somewhat sympathetic to that. Whereas COVID became this other situation. But we didn't do enough to explain to people why they were prioritized, why we want them to have access, why this trial was different, and why it was so important that it was different. I hope we learn that science can do a lot. We can talk, that scientists can learn to speak kind of human English, but also that scientists need to remember that they are part of communities and that they need to be accountable to their communities, and explaining, that science isn't a be all end all. Science is literally the process of figuring things out, and that things do update and change, and we need to be okay with the fact that things update and change based on new knowledge.
Is an HIV vaccine possible in our lifetime? And if so, how do we get there?
I think that there's hope that it could see in our lifetimes. I think that COVID gives some people some unrealistic expectations of vaccines and viruses. I'm like, because my friends ask me now, they're like, why don't we have that HIV vaccine? We got a COVID vaccine so quickly. And I'm like, HIV is just a little bit more complicated of a virus in like every way possible. But good that you like are putting connections together that maybe we should have vaccines to solve big public health crises. Like, keep that thought. But I think it's gonna take the will and the concerted efforts, and remembering that, you know, as tricky as HIV is, we continuously learn things from the HIV vaccines that spill off into other people and do powerful things in other communities. So we can find ways of grouping these things together, and it's amazing what we learn. Is it going to be something we learn in the next 5 years that there's a vaccine? Not without some sort of big scientific breakthrough, like we unlock something. But who knows? Because, you know, Moore's law, so technology just kind of exponentially grows. I think and hope, from what I've seen, from what we've done, that we could get there. It's just a matter of, are we resourced to do it? And do we keep enough of the will to do it? We can't pretend like HIV gets to be everything all the time, because that's just kind of rude. But we still do need we need the structures that we have built to be able to leverage and make things and the gains we've had happen and figure out how they work in concert with other areas.
And how do we unlock the resources to support this?
Well, you call your member of Congress, especially if they're on the Appropriations Committee, and you tell them that you want to continue funding HIV research as well as HIV programs, both domestically and internationally. Remember that our programs are not just at NIH, they're at CDC, they're at HHS, it's HHS Maine, they're at USAID, they're at DOD, get them all. But we really have to think about, what are we prioritizing, who are we prioritizing for, and what does it mean to keep our promises? You know, many a researcher has wanted to say, I will find something better for you. And we are in one of the most exciting times in science. Just think of the last 20 years of scientific advancement. It makes you think, what's gonna come from the next 20 years?
One of the things that I've heard you talk about quite a bit, especially in the last decade, is the social determinants of health. So I'm curious to hear how that intersects with your response as well about finding an effective HIV vaccine.
I hope and believe that we can find an HIV vaccine, as I just said. The vaccine is utterly useless if people don't take it, because other things they prioritize first are not taken care of. So it's really hard to get someone. I was once talking to a PrEP program in New Orleans, and they were like, it's so hard for us to get these inner city youth who are unhoused on PrEP. And I'm like, because you want to give them a bottle that's $16,000, but you can't get a roof over their head. For a lot of people, HIV is not their first issue. It's not even in their top 10. It's maybe in the top 50, depending on where you work, play, understand, if you like follow the epi data and you look at what's happening in your zip code. But for a lot of people, it's not high up on the list. So for them to listen to you, you need to talk some way about the things they need to hear about first, and then join the conversation about what you would like to offer to deliver them to make their lives easier. We see this a lot. I was just talking with my trans girlfriends the other day, and one of the best things we've done for HIV, the HIV community's done, is offer name changes and hair care appointments and makeup tutorials and free makeup to people who are transitioning. And for trans women, they were like, oh, these are things that I want, I will come. It would be cute if, we throw a wellness fair, which is like, here's how you get some housing voucher resources and how you get access to some social security stuff, and maybe how you access some Medicaid. And if you're older, some Medicare. And also, we would like to talk to you about this HIV clinical trial thing too, if you have time to talk to us. But we have to find a way of weaving ourselves into people's lives when we are not in the top 10. I always like to say, my job is to inform you. And that way you can make an informed yes or no. But I need you to have that information. And that's a first priority issue, is like you didn't have access to that education. Some things can be beneficial to people, but we have to figure out how to talk about them in the context of people's lives and the things that inhibit people from wanting to join a trial, staying in a trial, or even considering that like there's another option out there.
How do we address these social and systemic factors that you're raising?
A trial is designed to answer a question. It can't be everything for a community. But what a trial can do is bring a lot of community together and talk to people and say, hey, we need services to help people who are going to enroll in our trial. Hey, have you met this other partner? And those connections and those bonds can help service the community long before. And as we refer people out, if we're like, we have a good referral for you, that's also helping. And so the trial can serve that during the life of the trial, outside of just like answering the scientific question.
What advice do you have for community members and advocates looking to navigate the current political climate?
One, avoid talking about a party affiliation. You're not there to be a party person. You're there about an issue. Find a way in that links to their bio about an issue. We have had bipartisan support for HIV programs since the beginning. Senator Orrin Hatch, who just passed away, was a huge champion of Ryan White. Lindsey Graham remains a big champion of the Global Fund and PEPFAR. You're gonna have to take time and find something in their bio that you can connect with. And there's usually something. It's harder on some places. Obviously, COVID has put a certain division in around global health in some ways, and it's more old guard Republicans who are more global health friendly than some of the newer ones. Like Josh Hawley doesn't really love global health, but like George Bush is like the fountain of global health.
And that's from, following them on social media or looking at their websites and following their bios.
Look at their website, find them on social, look when they do town halls. So it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but most electeds do town halls. And so you can talk to them there or go to the town hall and ask a question about how they see. So ally with the university folks. They have their own agendas, obviously, as a university, but especially some of our researchers who are at universities can definitely leverage that to be helpful. And remind them of the big things that we've done together. The suffering we've alleviated, the babies that have been born without HIV, the prevention we've delivered, the people we've helped lift out of poverty because they don't have HIV, constantly weighing them down. And as more and more people retire, it gets harder. But there are some folks still on the Hill who do care about research, about what research can do, and about how research helps people.
How does the engagement look exactly? Like, how do you first sort of?
So I like to, if I'm gonna cold call or cold email an office, I will say, who I am, I saw blank about your boss said this thing, and then I will then relate it to the thing I want to talk about. And then say, I'd love to discuss this matter further with you. Best if you're a constituent, because they always want to seem like they're answering constituent email, but even in some broad senses, you can get in that way. But find something that their boss has said that sounds something like equity or health or compassion, and use that as a line getting in. A lot of the ones who express deep faith will do HIV work, because the faith community has had a very big role in HIV, especially HIV abroad.
What does the pipeline look like for people who are interested in advocacy, working sort of at the grassroots level? And is there a pipeline? Can people sort of transition from grassroots advocacy to then doing sort of globally focused health advocacy?
Scientists love to talk about the research. So if you can find a way to ask them a question that looks like you've read or have some like understanding of the research, and even the basic ways. And best way to do that is to read the abstract, then read their conclusions, then read from top to bottom, because it tells you what their like overall thought of the paper was, where they thought they landed, and then you can figure out how they got there. There are just some really helpful people in these spaces, and sometimes you have to like get yourself to the space, but while you're there, like pull-asides are your best friend. If you can get the community scholarship to Croy, go and ambush researchers right after they get off their panels and just be like, so what were you saying here? And read some papers. Some language of science is just repetition and exposing yourself to it. And once you've read enough papers and read enough journal articles, you just get used to understanding it a little bit better. And then write in the margins questions you have, and then ask a researcher or ask a research-based friend. Definitely those of us out there who, as they say, my DMs are open to answer certain questions about research. But, some of us who've been doing this work for a real long time want more people to know and really believe in democratizing the knowledge. There's no reason that the only people who show up at conferences should know some of the great analogies I've learned over the years. It's really getting access to the space and just having someone who can answer questions for you. And there are a lot of hacks to do that, but researchers, again, love to talk about themselves. And so if you can find someone who sound like they're talking more human English, they're great for that. And then from there, you can go to the ones who are like, let's talk about deep sequencing. You're like, yes, give it all to me.
Thank you again for your time.
Anytime.
Thank you for watching this episode of Intersections. For more information on additional episodes, education, and the work of the HVTN, please follow us on all major social channels under @HelpEndHIV. Also, to learn more about being a volunteer for an HIV vaccine study, please visit helpendhiv.org. Thank you.